Hey everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be running you through how to drastically improve your chances of winning team fights in League of Legends. Most players when thinking of team fights think of big 5v5s where complete chaos breaks out until there's a winner. While this does happen, there's actually a lot more to it in the stages leading up to a team fight, which most players don't think about and can give you a massive edge before the fight breaks out. By the end of this guide, you'll stop tunnel visioning on the 5v5 at hand and begin to think about all the ways to win a fight before it actually happens. So let's get into it. If your strategy were to focus purely on split pushing, your solo queue teams might get picked off constantly, giving the enemy team objectives to help them snowball and close out the game before you can get much done on your own. However, you also shouldn't look to just force any fights. If both teams were to group as 5 and look to fight each other, it would solely come down to team comms and mechanical skill to determine the winner. So this approach is like a coin flip. Setting up properly before a team fight can help give you an advantage and increase your chances of winning. We'll break this down into 3 missions you should look to execute after the laning phase to tip team fights into your favor before they even occur. These are numbers advantage, lane priority, and vision control. I'll be covering these in a solo queue game with Korean challenger top laner Thal on Jace. Before getting into the gameplay, I like to cover what I mean by getting the numbers advantage before a fight. This concept is basically about looking to chunk an opponent to very low HP so that they're forced to recall, or to simply pick someone off on your own or with the help of your teammates before looking to start a team fight. In this game, we see that Fiora is trying to take down the bottom outer tower while Karma and Elise are headed towards bot side of the map. Our Jace takes note of their positioning, so he pings to look to set up a pick onto her. Calling for help here is a great idea, as strong duelists such as Fiora, Jax or Riven can be tricky to take down in a 1v1. Even though Fiora gets an outplay with her flash and takes down Karma, they still end up trading as support for a top laner as Elise arrives to salvage the situation. After you manage to secure a numbers advantage, you should look to force a fight with your team to make use of this time window. Looking to start an objective is the most common way of forcing a fight, as it could bait the enemy team into walking through choke points and having to take a bad fight if they were to contest it. Another way of forcing a fight would be to come in from a flanking position, which basically means running into the enemy team from what would be their escape path to give your team time to catch up to them. As a top laner, you can also make use of your teleport to help you get a good flanking positioning on the enemy team. Teleport can allow you to instantly get into a flanking position if the enemy team is overextended and there's a ward behind them. Even on a squishy champion like Jace, you can look for these TP flanks if you have a numbers advantage. Just be careful not to get bursted down as you'll be split from your team. As our Jace quickly shoves the wave, as you should make sure to always do after a kill to deny farm, the enemy team goes for a pick while looking to take down the mid outer tower. Since Fiora is still dead, Jace makes use of the numbers advantage and channels his TP to look to cut off the enemy team as they try to escape through the jungle. Now that the enemy team is in a terrible position as they can't escape to safety, Fiora starts channeling her TP to back up her teammates. After Karma flashes out alive, it ends up being a 4v4, and so it would not be the safest choice to try to force a fight here. Now you may ask, why wouldn't they fight here since Jace has double buffs and the enemy just burned cooldowns on the dive we just saw? Well, even with a couple of ultimates being down, trying to run at the enemy team in even numbers can still backfire. A big mistake low elo players make is that they keep trying to force even number fights constantly. Since these are basically coin flips, you should instead get into the mindset of setting up an advantage first before looking for a fight. Keeping this concept in mind, our Jace decides to shove in the mid wave into the inner tower instead. Now I'll get to cover what it means to secure a lane priority. This is a concept you may be familiar with already, as the most common lane people talk about for this is mid lane priority. Basically, when you're grouped around mid, by pushing out the wave before the enemy, you'll secure a time or tempo advantage to start a play somewhere on the map while they assign members to clear it. Since mid lane has many paths available to look for plays, it is the most valuable to secure whenever you're grouped. For top laners specifically, you can make use of the same idea whenever you're able to shove a wave into your opponent's tower, as this will give you a time window to set up a fight as they stay on their tower to clearing it. He pings his team for assistance to make sure that they group with him for what he has in mind. In this situation, since the enemy team is out of position, by pushing the mid wave and moving forward looking to pressure the tower, it would force the enemy to go through choke points in their jungle if they wanted to come defended, which would create openings to look for a pick. To clarify, the plan is not to take down the tower, but to try to force the enemy to take a bad path towards it so that his team can look to get picks onto the enemy members as they go through these choke points. Jace drops a trinket to gain vision of the route they would have to take if they chose to defend mid, and spots Veigar and Lee heading over. Unfortunately, he messes up mechanically and misses a kill opportunity onto Veigar, as a few auto attacks and an empowered shock blast would have netted him a kill here. While Veigar is under tower clearing the wave, Jace's team stays ready looking for a pick. Sarah gets spotted by the ward as she tries to land a root, and they quickly collapse onto her to pick her off. So by getting a positional advantage through the mid lane priority in this situation, they had a few opportunities to pick enemy champions off without engaging them head on in a 4v4. Now, I'll fast forward a couple minutes into the replay and show you another situation. Here we see our Jace finishing clearing a wave under tower and then immediately heading towards his team near Baron. You may ask, why didn't he keep pushing to get lane priority before moving? Since his teleport is down, he wouldn't be able to help his team if they were to get caught. Also, he shouldn't commit to a split push win condition here, as Jace vs Fiora is a matchup that can easily go badly for him, so grouping will generally be better. Since his plan is to group, how should his team look to start a team fight here? Now I'll get to cover a more team-reliant concept, which is vision control. Basically, if your team has good single target damage output, as he does this game with Yasuo and Elise, you can look to clear the enemy's vision around Baron in hopes that they get baited to think that they're actually trying to kill it and end up face checking into the vision controlled area. If your solo queue teams aren't generally too organized, if you think your champions are strong enough to make use of this concept, you should let your team know what your plan is so they can help out. Whenever you're in this situation, you can also change your trinket to a sweeper and also buy a control ward or two to take matters into your own hands. Although Baron is the best objective to set up baits around, if your team isn't strong enough to take this down, other objectives such as the Rift Herald or Infernal Dragon are usually worthwhile setting up vision control for and are much easier to fight. However, if you're facing a stubborn split pushing player, you won't have much time to wait around looking for a pick. So you can at least head over to drop a control ward for your team around the objective and then head back to defend your tower in that case. As he waits on top of a control ward, Caitlyn shows up on a ward and so he's able to land a shock blast onto her. Remember that by poking or chunking an enemy member to low HP, you could create a numbers advantage as they'll be much easier to kill if a fight were to break out. Then, as the minion waves are about to meet mid, his team goes right away to clear the wave and then go back into the vision control area. It's very important to make sure to secure mid priority in this situation, since if they were to continue stacking S5 looking for a pick without clearing the mid wave, the enemy team could clear it and look to push mid grouped up. This would force his team to either start the Baron, which could backfire if the enemy team came back into the pit as they would be low from it, or to go to mid to defend, which would give the enemy team time to stall out the situation. As the enemy team hasn't had vision of Baron for a while now, and think they may have started it, they begin to walk towards the pit. As soon as they're in range, they engage into them head on, picking off Sarah first and then baiting the rest of their team to continue fighting with a numbers disadvantage. Thanks to proper team fighting setup from his team, they pick up the Baron without much trouble, which helps them close out the game shortly after. That's it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.